Welcome. Today we need to talk about constitutional monarchies. Now, when people think of the 17th century, they tend to think of absolutism, of France, of Spain, of Sweden even, figures like Louis XIV. But the reality is there were two competing monarchical systems at the time. And the other one is what we need to deal with today. It's constitutional monarchy. Here we would look towards the Dutch Republic, or for our case study, England. Now, constitutional monarchy is simply a system of kind of what you would think of as a representative monarchy, but please don't be fooled. It's representative in the sense it's representative by a few wealthy, born-to-place individuals. But what we need to do is not so much look at what it is, but how it came to be in England. And the story we need to tell is of the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution, because those two events together explain what's happening. So, without further ado, we need to look at this fine fellow. He is James VI of Scotland. But when Elizabeth I, famous Queen Elizabeth, died, she left him the realm. And so James VI of Scotland became James I of England, combining Scotland and England into what we call Great Britain. Now, he wanted to be an absolute monarch. He ruled from 1603 to 1625. He had seen what Henry and Louis XIII were doing, and he realized that how he could secure his position was by playing different factions off one another. There were two real different groups of nobles. One was the old money nobles, right? They were primarily Anglican or Church of England. They wanted top-down control. They are descendant of the great warriors of old. But there was another side that they called the country nobles. Those Anglican old money court nobles, those court nobles lived in London. But the country nobles had a lot of money, but they had to live out at their lands where they can maintain them. They actually worked their lands. And they were newer nobility. They had a lot of money, but it had been developed over the past couple generations. And they are mostly Presbyterian and Calvinists. And what James realized, if he could keep these sides battling with each other or play them off each other, he could secure more and more power. And he did that very successfully. The problem is, his son was kind of a moron. His name is Charles I. Now, Charles I said, I'm an absolute monarch. I'm going to act like an absolute monarch. So he ruled 1625 to 1649, but for 11 years after 1629, he instated something called personal rule. He said, I'm not going to call Parliament. I'm not going to call this representative body of nobles. I'm just going to rule on my own. The problem is that in 1215, his predecessor, King John, signed something called the Magna Carta, and part of it said that to raise new taxes, the king has to consult a council of nobles, in this case Parliament. So when Scotland broke out in a huge rebellion at the end of this 11 years, he had no choice. He had to call Parliament. And when he called them, they immediately passed this thing called the Triennial Act that said the king has to call Parliament every 3 years. And they also said the king cannot dissolve or send Parliament home without their approval. They're really tying his hands. The king rejects this. He's like, I'm an absolute monarch. I'm king. It's divine right. I get to do whatever I want. So he starts arresting some of these nobles, some of these members of Parliament who are going against him. Well, Parliament scatters. These people see this and they run for the hills. Well, Charles thought this was great, except when they ran for the hills, they formed an army and came back. This is what we call the English Civil War. 1646. parliamentary forces and Scottish forces will unite against the royalist forces, those nobles who are loyal to the king. And you can see from our map here that in 1642 they weren't doing too well, but over the next couple years, the parliamentarians, the Roundheads, will defeat the Cavaliers or the Royalists very successfully, mainly partially due to this man, Oliver Cromwell. He is a kind of lower level noble, but he turned out to be very adept in warfare. He beheaded Charles I. And beheading is actually a big deal, because to chop the head off the king removes the head from the body, which gives the symbolism, and everyone got this symbolism, which removes the head of the state from the country, or from the kingdom. It was a bold move and statement. Well, the problem is, under the English Republic, Cromwell will find that it's almost impossible for him to get done what he's doing, because he has all these feuding nobles, and he ends up seizing control kind of for himself, ruling under this kind of military government for about a decade. When he dies, what do? They don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to chaos, so they actually install a king. They take Charles I's son, Charles II. This is not him. We'll get to him in a second. And they put him on the throne. And Charles II will rule for 25 years, 1660 to 1685. They call it the Restoration. But he understands. He saw what happened to his father. He toes the line. He gives a lot of power to Parliament. But the problem is, this man is his brother. His name is James II, and he's a Catholic. Charles II did not have any kids, so the throne was going to this man, James II. And when it did go to this man, people were very concerned. They were okay with an Anglican, they were okay with a Presbyterian or a Calvinist, but they're not okay with a Catholic. All their enemies are Catholic. Catholics are controlled by the Pope in their minds. But the thought was, he's old. And he doesn't have a son, and his eldest daughter is a Protestant. So, whatever, we'll wait till he dies. Here's the problem, he had a kid. I mean, when he was older than anybody thought possible, he had a boy. And that boy was baptized Catholic. Well, people rose up. They didn't want to start another English civil war, but they started threatening the king, and the king, realizing this danger, he fled. He fled to his sister's family, which happened to be the King of France, hoping that the King of France would give him troops to come back and bring everything in line. Well, Parliament realized this opportunity, and what they did is Parliament went to his eldest daughter, Mary, and said, "We would like you to be our queen." And Mary said, "Well, no, I'm not going to be queen, but I will rule alongside my husband, William of Normandy, or not William of Normandy, William of Orange." He is a Protestant prince of the Netherlands. And so they come at the invitation of Parliament, and they rule as William and Mary, right? We've heard this name. They are joint monarchs. Now, why is this so significant? Why this is so significant is because they're not chosen by God. They're not even directly chosen by birth. Mary is certainly not in line, and William has no rights to the throne. But they are there, and they become king and queen at the behest of Parliament. Which means it is Parliament, not God, as in divine right, that made these people king and queen. Which means Parliament, since they made them king and queen, they could take it away. And suddenly, with this moment, this glorious revolution, you have the creation of constitutional monarchy, where the true power is within Parliament. Now, this is not the end of the story. Parliament and the kings of England will battle for a great amount of time. But this is the dawn of what we think of representative government, at least in its modern form. Thank you.